If you have your Bibles this morning, if you'll grab them, go to Daniel chapter 7. We'll be in Daniel 7 and 8 this morning. A lot of ground to cover, and we'll get to that in a minute. But as the kids are filing out to go to Kids Club, I want to start this morning with a really simple fairy tale, and I'm just going to tell it to you. And I just want you to visualize it. I want you to think through it. Use your imagination to try to picture it as I tell it. It's very, very simple. I want you to imagine a village in the mountains, just nestled somewhere beautiful, somewhere scenic. I'll let your imaginations fill in the rest. And it's filled with very simple, basic village people. They live off the land. The land provides everything that they need. They're very hardworking and they're very happy, these villagers, until one day. And as you know how stories go, everything was fine until it wasn't. And that's the day that the dragon showed up. Imagine the dragon. I want you to visualize it. And everything changed. And no one knew where the dragon came from. It just showed up one day many winters ago, filled with fire and fury. And that dragon did exactly what dragons do. And the village panicked. And people were running to and fro. And some people tried to hide. And other people tried to fight back, but it didn't matter. The dragon was simply too big and too strong and too angry. And so unfortunately, that became their new routine. Winter after winter, the dragon would show up and attack the village, and winter after winter, the people were powerless to stop it. No matter what they did, they just couldn't beat the dragon. So eventually, as you might imagine, the people fell into a deep despair, and they lost all hope of ever being free from this dragon and its wrath, until they heard about a special sword. Now, according to legend, there was a single sword, but if you found this sword and you wielded this sword, it had the power to cut through even the most dreadful dragon's hide and slay it. Now, the finding of that sword is a story for another day, but let's just say the villagers got the sword and they were filled with new courage and they were filled with great hope. And so they charged up to the dragon's cave. And even though many more people were lost in the battle that ensued, they finally won and they slayed the dragon. And peace and prosperity returned to the land, and those simple villagers were happy once again. Now, I'm not going to win any awards from that story, but what did you think? It followed a pretty basic plot line, didn't it? It's one that we've kind of come to recognize in our day and age. This is how stories go with fairy tales and villagers. People are doing fine until they're not. Some monstrous enemy, a dragon of some sort, shows up and ruins the day, and they can't do anything about it. They're powerless to overcome this monster that has beset them until they find some sort of mythical or magical or legendary weapon. And once they have the weapon, that's when they can rally the people, and they can fight back, and they can finally overcome and be happy again. Now, this morning, you may be wondering, what on earth does this have to do with our sermon for this morning? And in a word, everything. Because today we're going to talk all about monsters. And that's what we're going to see here in Daniel chapter 7 and 8. And as I mentioned before, if you've been with us as we've been working our way through the book of Daniel, this is where it starts to get really weird. And that's putting it lightly. From this moment forward, really, is filled with all sorts of wild stories and crazy, weird visions that Daniel has. And to start things off, here in Daniel 7 and 8, Daniel has two separate visions. But both of them are filled with monsters. These beasts that are big and scary and overwhelming and unstoppable, and they cause mayhem and destruction everywhere they go. But before we get into any of that this morning, what those beasts are and what God's people are supposed to do about it, I want to give us a quick word of reminder and caution. As I keep saying, Daniel's visions are super weird. And I encourage you to go home, read through these chapters in their entirety on your own. We don't have time to cover every verse this morning. Read it for yourself and see. They're filled with all sorts of fantastic, we might say, imagery. Things that don't really make sense, seem made up, or seems like they fit in a fairy tale. So it's really easy for us to then, when we read passages like this in Scripture, to get lost in the weeds with it. On the one hand, some people just get bogged down. It's too weird. It's too much. They don't know what to do with it. They're confused by it, so they just kind of push it away. But on the other hand, some people get hyper-fixated, and they try to decode every little detail, decipher every little detail here in these visions like it's some sort of riddle. But that's not how we're going to spend our time together this morning. We're going to be mindful of the imagery here in Daniel 7 and 8, but as always, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the message, because there's a point here. There's a message here for God's people back then with Daniel, for the generations that followed, and for God's people, us, today. And that's what we're after. So, all that being said, are you ready to go monster hunting? Let's look. Daniel chapter 7, follow along as I read for us verses 1 through 8. It says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay there in his bed. So he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. And Daniel declared, this is the dream. I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first one was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And then behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, arise, devour much flesh. And then after this I looked, and behold, yet another, like a leopard, but with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And this beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Then after this I saw in the night more visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke into pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and this one had 10 horns. So I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them yet another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Let's stop right there. Speaking great things. Okay. Weird, right? And it only gets weirder from here, but let's work through it together. As verse 1 points out, look back at verse 1. If you've been with us since the beginning of this series, we've been tracking through a timeline with Daniel. Daniel's life has been moving forward, and now time's going to get real funny as these visions get real funny too. And so this is really kind of like a flashback, if you will, in the timeline, in the storyline of Daniel, because it says he had this vision way back when? Way back when Belshazzar was in his first year as king of Babylon. And we're not going to worry about that timeline because we want to worry about what it is that Daniel saw. So what did he see? He sees this wild and chaotic scene. The wind is howling and the seas are raging. And then one by one, these terrifying monsters start to emerge out of the sea. And what's the first one he saw? The first one looks like a lion, which is big and ferocious and terrifying on its own, but this lion has wings like an eagle. It's a flying lion, and then the wings get plucked off, and the lion stands up on its back, the mind of a man. So what does that mean? This terrifying lion, eagle, beast thing is looking kind of humanistic, even though it's not. But before Daniel can even process what he's seeing and make sense of that, another beast emerges. And what's the second one? This one's a bit of a relief, if we can call it that. It's just a normal bear, but it's not, because it's big and it's angry and it's hungry. It says it already has flesh in its teeth. It's already been gnawing on someone's bones, and then a voice from somewhere tells it, arise and devour. In other words, get up and eat, right? But before he can even process this or even process the bear in comparison to the flying lion, a third beast shows up. And this one is like this 4-headed leopard thing, and it has 4 wings, so apparently it can fly as well. And Daniel can't explain it, and he doesn't know how he knows it, but he can tell with this one somehow that this one has extra authority. It's been given power to rule, to hold dominion. And he still hasn't caught his breath, and then this 4th beast emerges, and it's the worst of them all. As we read here, like Daniel doesn't even know what to call it. The other ones were similar enough to things that he knew, kind of like a lion, kind of like a bear, kind of like a leopard thing and wings. But this last beast, there's no frame of reference for him. It's so overwhelming and so different and so terrifying. It's really just like some sort of mega beast. It's bigger and stronger and scarier and nastier than all the other monsters that have arisen. And this one, to make it even weirder and worse, has all these different horns on its head. And as he's looking at the horns, trying to make sense of the horns, a new one appears. And when it appears, it pushes out 3 other ones. And then to get even weirder, this final little horn that shows up opens its eyes like a human and is looking at him. And then it opens its mouth and it starts bragging. It starts declaring how wonderful and great it is. Okay, y'all got all that? You got some You got some weird visuals in your head, maybe a little anxiety in your heart. Well, good. Let's keep going and let's add to it. Let's look now in chapter 8, Daniel's second vision. Daniel chapter 8, starting in verse 1. It says, "Now in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me." So another vision. Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. And I saw in this vision, and what I saw, I was in Susa, the capital of the empire, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was at the Ulai Canal. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, there was a ram standing there on the bank of the canal. And it had 2 horns, and both horns were high, meaning big. But one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. So he's watching these horns grow out of the ram's head. And I then saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward, and no beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased, and he became great. Verse 5, "And as I was considering this, trying to make sense of this, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth without even touching the ground. And the goat had this conspicuous horn between his eyes. And he came up to the ram with his 2 horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his power and his wrath. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him, and he struck the ram and broke his 2 horns. And then the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled on him, and there was no one who could rescue the ram from the goat's power. And then the goat became exceedingly great. But when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And instead of that one horn, there came up 4 new, conspicuous, obvious horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of those horns came a new little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and towards the glorious land." That's back home, that's Judah. "It grew great, even to the host of heaven. And some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. And a host will be given over it together with a regular burnt offering because of transgression. And it will throw truth to the ground, and it will act, and it will prosper." Okay, deep breath. Let's dive into this one. What do we have here this time? This is 2 years later, after the first vision that he had that was weird enough, that he didn't quite know what to do with. He has this second vision, and this time he finds himself not in the chaotic sea environment. He finds himself somewhere familiar, somewhere he recognizes, and when he looks up to make sense of where he is, he sees something seemingly normal this time, just a ram. He knows what a ram is. It's fine, and this ram has 2 horns, which is also pretty normal, which is what rams do. And the only thing maybe abnormal about this one is one of the horns was bigger than the other one. And as he's watching, at first, the ram is just being normal. It's just standing there, but then something changes, and the ram is angry, and the ram starts running around and ramming things. And whoever or whatever gets in its way just gets mowed down. He's running all over the place, knocking people over and trampling them. And so the idea then is that this ram isn't just angry, it's unstoppable. No one can push back against it. If you get in its way, you're going to get run over and trampled under its feet. So a ram is running around ramming things. But then things take another turn as the ram is running around ramming things. Out of nowhere, off to the side, comes this flying goat. Did we catch that? Not come charging in, as if that would make sense in this dream scenario, this vision, but he comes flying in, and what does he do? He rams the ram, right? He comes charging in, he's flying in from the side, and he doesn't have normal goat horns. It says he has 1 horn right in the middle of his head. So we've got a unicorn goat that's flying through the sky. He comes up to the unstoppable ram, and what does he do? He stops him. He doesn't just stop him, he crushes him, and he tramples him underfoot. Now this is terrible. And he tramples him, flying. If we're watching, if we're keeping score at home, this first beast that we thought was normal isn't, is powerful, destroying anyone in his way. No one can stop him. Now a new, weirder beast has shown up and stopped that which we thought was unstoppable. So if we couldn't stop this first one, what hope do we have with this second one? None. And so this one now grows powerful. It grows great. And this one horn, the unicorn, breaks off, and what comes out? 4 new horns sprouting all sorts of different directions. And then out of those 4 comes, here we go, another little horn who's really arrogant. And he grows great and mighty. It says he reaches up to the heavens. He grows so big and so powerful, he knocks stars out of the sky and he tramples them to show you that I can touch anyone and they can't touch me. I'm unstoppable. I'm the best. I'm all powerful. So, what do we do with this? Again, we stop and we pause and we have to imagine that Daniel is got a lot of work to do coming to terms with what we need to recognize is first and foremost, Daniel had a problem with what he was saying. It wasn't just like us today where we can kind of laugh and be like, that's super weird, but that's how dreams go. That's not what we're working with here. Daniel's not just weirded out. As we read these chapters, he's terrified. He's overwhelmed. He's shaking. The color fades from his face when he wakes up because he doesn't know what to do. See, it wasn't like Daniel was just seeing these things play out in like some sort of movie screen in his mind. Oh, it was just a bad dream. Scary, but disconnected from me in my life. The language that is used here, Daniel feels like he's in the dream. Like he's not just watching it happen, he's in the middle of the action, front row seat to all the mayhem and the horror as it unfolds before him. Fortunately, though, in both cases, Daniel's not left on his own to figure things out. In both visions, the first one and the second one, chapter 7 and chapter 8, Daniel looks around trying to make sense of things, and there is provided for him an angelic messenger who's ready to tell him, help messenger who's ready to help him understand what he just saw. So for the first vision, the messenger said very simply, this is chapter 7, verse 17, if you're taking notes. He says, these 4 great beasts that you've seen, they represent 4 great kings who will arise out of the earth. And that fourth one, by the way, the mega beast, he's going to be the worst of them all. That kingdom will be greater than all the others, but also more destructive. And you need to know that this fourth one in particular is going to cause all sorts of pain and problems for God's people. And those 10 horns that you saw, those represent 10 different kings in that line of kingdoms. And the last one, that little one that showed up, he's going to be the most terrible of all. He's going to wage war specifically against God's people, and he's going to be good at it. He's going to be successful. That's the first vision, Daniel. Here's the second one. Daniel's told in the second vision that it's not just a vision of things like immediately to come, like, hey, I'm telling you what's going to happen soon. He's told in the second vision, chapter 8, verse 17, that this is a vision of things to come at the end. Now, we are curious, what does that mean? As I imagine Daniel was curious, what does that mean? Like, tell me, what end are we talking? But the angel does not seem interested in giving him a specific date. The angel does not seem interested in telling him what end he's talking about. The end of my life? The end of this season? The end of this kingdom? Are we talking the end of all things? And the angel doesn't even entertain any of that because knowing precisely the date isn't the point. There's something better and more important that Daniel needs to see. So in this vision, Daniel's told that ram you saw with the 2 horns, it represents the kings of Media and Persia. And then that goat that shows up, he represents the king of Greece. And as for that unicorn horn, it represents the first king of Greece. And then the 4 new horns that show up are 4 kingdoms that split off from him. But then you need to know that toward the end of their time, there's a new and a worse king that's going to show up. And he's going to be the worst of them all. He's going to be brazen. He's going to be bold. And he's going to be cunning. He's going to be crafty and deceptive. And he's going to be, unfortunately, wildly successful. Everywhere he goes, he wins. Everywhere he goes, he causes mayhem and destruction. And he's going to become so great and so good at opposing not just the world before him, but God's people in particular, that he's going to be bold enough to try to take on God himself. Okay, so let's pause here again for a moment. And let me point out something that a lot of people way smarter than me have spent way more time than I have taking these 2 interpretations in chapter 7 and chapter 8 and trying to then map them out on the timeline of human history. And they've been fairly successful. You can do that. But as I mentioned earlier, that gets us in the weeds, and that's not our focus this morning. So let me just, for the sake of what we're doing here, let me give you what I call the beastly bottom line. What have we seen here? What are we working with? Well, what are we trying to see here? It's this. If you're taking notes, you can write it down. We need to know that God's people will often be up against more than they can handle. I don't know if you picked up on that. God's people will often be up against more than they can handle. It was true for Daniel back in his day. We've already seen. It was true for those who were going to come after Daniel, as we see here in these visions. And you already know it's absolutely true of us in our lives today. See, God's people have lived and continue to live in a world that is filled with powers that are so much bigger and badder than us, if I can use that phrase. We know, as we just sang, there will be kings and kingdoms that rise up and, like these visions, act like monsters. Have we not seen this play out universally across the world throughout history? Kings and kingdoms, emperors and their empires rise up and they act not good, but like monsters, like these unstoppable beasts running over whoever gets in their way. So if that's true, if history is filled with powerful monsters, what do powerful monsters do to people? They terrorize them and they make their lives miserable. So God's people need to know that suffering is going to happen. Persecution is going to happen. It's part of living in this broken world. So what that means is we don't have to waste any of our time wondering if hardship might be coming our way, but wondering if worldly powers might not treat us favorably. We can already recognize up front that's going to happen. That's already settled. But I hope you realize today that that's only part of the story. See, there's actually a better, deeper question to ask. Not if bad things are going to happen, but what's God going to do about it? I mean, surely he's not just going to sit on the sidelines and watch and let all this play out, will he? And I think the first part of the answer to that question is, who said he was sitting on the sidelines in the first place? We've touched on this every week of this story so far. Whose story is this? It's not Daniel's. It's not any of these kings, and it's surely not these beasts. They think it is, but whose story is this? This is God's. So just because we don't know what he's doing or why he's doing it, just because we can't see what he's doing, doesn't mean that he's not at work. We can know that God is never idle. We can know that God's power and his authority are never up for debate. They're never in question. God is always king. God is always sovereign. In other words, he is the one who's driving history. He's the one who's raising up kings and kingdoms, and he's the one who then tears them back down. And even though we may not understand his timing, Scripture and history both make it clear that God doesn't let evil kings and kingdoms run wild forever. They're on a leash. And judgment is coming. And that's actually the foundation of both these visions. As much as these monsters are real, and they're awful, and they're powerful, they're not all powerful. But God is. See, right in the middle of Daniel's first vision in chapter 7, Daniel looks, and there's this new figure that enters the scene, a figure that he only understands as the Ancient of Days. And this figure is overwhelming, more overwhelming, in a totally different way. This Ancient of Days is clothed in pure white. And everywhere he goes, all around him is fire, this righteous, pure fire. Even when he speaks, fire comes out from him. And he walks right into the middle of this scene of horror, and he sets up his throne. And there are thousands of angels around him, attending to him, and millions more around watching him and praising him, waiting to see what he's going to do. And what he does is he holds court. He brings out the divine ledger book, and he brings judgment. So do you remember that mega beast, that unstoppable terror from chapter 7? Look now at chapter 7, verses 26 and 27. It says, the court, this is the divine court, that the Ancient of Days holds as judge. The court shall sit in judgment on this mega beast, and its dominion will be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And then the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole, and the dominion and the greatness of heavens shall be given to who? The people of the Most High. Their kingdom then shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall come and serve and obey them. But what about that horribly wicked and powerful king from chapter 8's vision? Well, we find out not only were his days numbered from the beginning, this is verse 19 of chapter 8, but the angelic messenger also tells Daniel that when this wicked king, this monster of a king, gets to the point that he thinks he can take on God himself, he'll be broken. He's going to stand before God, trying to take on God, proving that he's God, and he's going to be broken, and not by a human hand. In other words, once again, judgment is coming. And the one true God of the universe, the one true King of the universe, Daniel's God, Daniel's true King, he's the one who's bringing it. Now, as you can imagine in Daniel's life with what he's already seen and what him and his people, this would have been a powerful word of hope and courage and comfort, a needed reminder. And again, not just for him, but for the families and the generations to follow. But for you and I today, we need to know that there's one more figure that shows up in these chapters that makes all the difference. And we have to reckon with him. So look at chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Daniel says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, so that all peoples, all nations, all languages should serve him, worship him. And his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and it will never pass away. And his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. So, who is better than the beastly kings of this world? The one like a son of man. And who is going to put those beastly kings in their place once and for all? The one like the Son of Man. And who represents the saints of the Most High? The one like the Son of Man. And who is going to receive and then rule over the everlasting kingdom of God? The one like a Son of Man. So who is this figure? Daniel himself, having seen this at his day and age, would have been really confounded by it, really confused by it. I mean, this figure shows up riding on the clouds of heaven like a god, and he's doing things that only God can do, and he's set to rule over God's kingdom, but at the same time, looking at him, he appears to be human. How can this be? Who is this figure? Who is this one like a son of man? Well, let's cut right to the point. Let's let him speak for himself. Mark chapter 14. When Jesus is put on trial, the high priest questions him and says, are you the Messiah? Are you saying you're the Son of the Most Blessed One? Are you saying you're the Son of God? And Jesus says, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. So who is this great Son of Man who's coming to make all things right? It's Jesus. Let me pause here one more time. I know this has been a lot to take in today. And to be honest, we're really only skimming the surface. We're just hitting the highlights. But let me try to bring it all together for us. What did I say at the beginning of the sermon? Let's not get lost in the weeds of Daniel's visions. Let's look for the message. So here's the message. Here's the big point that we need to see that God is showing Daniel and showing us. When up against the beast of this world, we don't need a sword. We need a Savior. And the good news is God sent one. That's the point of this story. See, as it turns out, what Daniel saw wasn't just a vision. It was a promise. God is in control. God is going to set things right once and for all, and he's doing it through Jesus. He's doing it through Jesus. So let me close with this today. What do you and I do in 2024? What do we do with information like this? With visions like this, with stories like this? Again, as always, the point isn't just like developing more head knowledge or raising biblical literacy. Those are fine, but there's more for us. The point for us this morning isn't just to connect the dots here. The point, as always, is to turn to this Jesus. Turn to him and trust him and then follow him. And as we do that, as we turn to Jesus, even if we don't have it all figured out, as we turn to Jesus and trust him, even though everything around us speaks to the contrary, as we turn to Jesus and we trust him and we follow him, what that does for us, starting in us and then working out through us, is it brings us in line with that great victory that's won over the beastly kingdoms of this world. Because it's his victory, and he's already won it, and he's invited us in to share it with him. And not just now, but when he comes back to finish what he started and to lead us into eternity. So in the meantime, do you know what we do? You do. You do know what we do. We talk about it all the time. In the meantime, between now and then, when Christ returns to bring us into the fullness of his kingdom forever, you and I get busy worshiping. In other words, that's the big picture today. If you're taking notes, one last thing you can write down. Worship is our warfare. That's how we fight. We live like Jesus is alive, because he is.
And we live like Jesus is the king, because he is. And we live like Jesus is coming back to bring his kingdom, because he is. This is how we live our lives. Do we see it this morning? So we do whatever we can to be faithful. That's the point of this whole series. We get to be faithful. We can be faithful. We will be faithful because God is king. God is faithful. He's already mapped it out. He's leading history to a good point, and we get to follow him there. So in the meantime, we get busy worshiping him and living faithful lives. And everywhere we go, whatever we say, whatever we do, we are spreading his kingdom and watching what he does through his son by his Spirit. That's the life that we've been given.